Welcome to the How to Be Awesome at Your Job podcast, the show where brilliant professionals share how to sharpen the universal skills required to flourish at work. Enjoy more career fun, wins, meaning, and money with your host, Pete Makaitis.
Hello, and thanks for joining us here for episode 689 with Jennifer Kahnweiler. Jennifer's got some pro tips. If you are an introvert or you love an introvert or you work with introverts, she's got some excellent pro tips on how to tap into these quiet strengths. So you'll learn 1, the core strengths of introverts, 2, how to get the most out of the introverts on your team, and 3, the ABCDs of excellent extrovert-introvert collaboration. So if you want to check out the show notes or the transcript or the links to items we've referenced, please drop on by awesomeatyourjob.com, EP 689. Now, here's Jennifer's story. Jennifer B. Kahnweiler is a bestselling author and one of the leading speakers on introverts in the workplace. Her pioneering books, The Introverted Leader, Quiet Influence, The Genius of Opposites, and Creating Introvert-Friendly Workplaces have been translated into 18 languages. Jennifer has partnered with leading organizations like Amazon, Kimberly-Clark, NASA, and the US CDC. She's delivered her signature presentations from Singapore to Spain. She holds the Certified Speaking Professional designation awarded to a small percentage of speakers and serves as a mentor to many professional women. She's a native New Yorker, and she currently calls Atlanta, Georgia, her home. Big thanks to Jennifer for sharing her wisdom with us. And big thanks to our sponsors. Check them out. One sponsor to check out is Harvard Business Review. This brilliant magazine, published at hbr.org, is the leading destination for smart management thinking. Fun fact, HBR has been mentioned in 108 episodes of the show. That's because HBR has great stuff that comes up often. They've got explainer videos, podcasts, real-world case studies, and much more. I think of HBR each night that I put on my special orange glasses. Their article, Will Blue Light Glasses Improve Your Sleep?, revealed that those who wore them reported better sleep and a 7% improvement in work performance as compared to those who wore the sham glasses. So I cite HBR anytime anyone tells me that I look silly wearing them. Now, much of HBR's content is available for free when you sign up at their site. Subscriptions that get you unlimited content cost $10 a month. If you visit hbr.org/subscriptions and enter the promo code AWESOME, you can save 10% off of that subscription. Again, to save 10% off of your HBR subscription, go to www.hbr.org/subscriptions and enter the promo code AWESOME. One sponsor to check out is Storyworth. Whenever I'm thinking about meaningful Father's Day gifts, Storyworth leaps to mind. Storyworth helps you preserve precious memories and stories from your father for years to come. Each week, Storyworth emails your loved ones a thought-provoking question that you get to help pick, such as, what's the bravest thing you've ever done? I personally love the prompt so much that I have refreshed Storyworth's questions page many times looking for more. Storyworth makes the writing process super quick and easy. All your loved one needs to do is respond to that email with a story, and then you get a quick copy of that. And after a year of this fun, Storyworth compiles your loved one's stories and photos into a beautiful keepsake hardcover book that you'll be able to share and revisit for generations to come. Families love Storyworth so much, they've got 25,000 five-star reviews on Trustpilot and have millions of stories preserved. So give all the fathers in your life a unique, heartfelt gift they'll all cherish for years. Storyworth. Right now, you can save $10 on your first purchase when you go to storyworth.com/awesome. That's storyworth.com/awesome to save $10 on your first purchase. And big thanks to our sponsor, Acorns. Acorns makes it easy to start automatically saving and investing for your future. You don't need a lot of money or expertise to invest with Acorns. In fact, you can get started with just your spare change. Acorns recommends an expert-built portfolio that fits you and your money goals, then automatically invests your money for you. NerdWallet.com, whom I love on these sorts of matters, gives Acorns a whopping 4.7 stars and says, quote, if you want to make the most of your spare change, there's no better place to do that than Acorns. Head to acorns.com/awesome or download the Acorns app to start saving and investing for your future today. And we got a legal disclaimer here. It may not be representative of all clients. Tier 1 compensation provided. Compensation provides an incentive to positively promote Acorns. View important disclosures at acorns.com/awesome. Investing involves risk, including the loss of principal. Please consider your objectives, risk tolerance, and Acorns' fees before investing. Acorns Advisors LLC, Acorns, is an SEC-registered investment advisor. Brokerage services are provided to clients of Acorns by Acorns Securities LLC, member FINRA/SIPC. For more information, visit acorns.com. Now, here's Jennifer. Jennifer, thanks so much for joining us here on the How to Be Awesome at Your Job podcast.
It is my pleasure, Pete. Thanks for having me.
Well, I'm excited to dig into your wisdom, and I'm also excited to hear your story. This morning in the gym, there was a lot of Beatles playing, and you actually had an encounter with Paul McCartney. What's the story here?
Oh my gosh. This story pops up in family lore time and again. We were vacationing out on Eastern Long Island, where I grew up in the New York area, and the kids were little then, probably about your kids' ages, and we were just having a casually Sunday stroll, and there was nobody on the street in a little town called Amagansett. And my daughter was turning to talk to me, and she was knocked down by a kid on a bike. And of course, as a parent, you jump up. She was fine. She was okay. She just was a little bit startled. And we heard, and I'm not going to try to imitate the British accent, but Bill and my husband, looked at each other in 1 second as we were looking at our daughter. And we realized that I was looking right into the eyes of my favorite Beatle, Paul McCartney. And he couldn't have been nicer and made his son apologize for being careless. So I was impressed by that. And I got to have my Beatles encounter.
Well, that is memorable and extra.
It was.
It's not just, there he is in the airport, but.
There you go. And I listened to the Beatles channel too on the radio. So I always think about him. Interesting thinking about personalities, and the Beatles have been so analyzed to death, but people talk about the opposite personalities of him and John, and who was the introvert, who was the extrovert. I heard that question come up. I'm not quite sure, but I think Paul is pretty introverted.
Mm-hmm.
I'll ask him the next time I see him.
Next time, yeah. Well, so yeah, we're going to talk about introversion here, and boy, you've spent quite a boatload of time studying this topic and writing multiple books: The Introverted Leader, Quiet Influence, Creating Introvert-Friendly Workplaces. So, wow, tell us from all of this work, any particularly surprising or fascinating discoveries that you've made along the way?
Well, I'll tell you what, I came into this work 12 years ago. I started writing. But I think the greatest discovery is, if there's a great one, is that the definition of introversion and the awareness of introversion has kind of morphed. And the awareness is basically worldwide now. So that's been a surprise. I didn't realize it wasn't just from my work, believe me, but there was a whole cadre of us in the beginning, including Susan Cain and others, who started dipping into this topic because it had made such a difference I'll speak for myself in my own life, as a person married to an introvert for 48 years now. That personally helped me navigate my marriage as one lens. It's not the only one for sure. But as I started working in organizations, that was a really, really helpful lens to look through. And I realized a lot of people didn't realize, A, that they were possibly introverted, and that's why they were having a challenge in our type A organizations. And B, others didn't understand introversion. So that's probably the biggest kind of nice surprise as the journey has gone on, Pete, really.
Well, so now I'm intrigued. The definition has morphed. I mean, I am a certified Myers-Briggs practitioner. It's been a while since I've done a workshop.
Nice.
I don't know if I'm still in good standing with the organization, but
I don't think it matters. No, I think you'll be fine.
So I have a definition in my mind about what introversion is.
Yeah.
So tell us, how has it evolved?
I think the biggest change that has occurred is that it's not as discrete as we once might have thought. We said, and just to kind of backtrack a little bit, introversion is about energy and extroversion is about energy. And introverts, the typical understanding of that is introverts get their energy from within. They're in their heads, they're thoughtful, they kind of think before they speak, etc. Extroverts tend to get energized by other people. But that's really pretty simplistic, really, if you think about it. And so we've come to now morph into, it's more of a spectrum, like a lot of areas that we talk about, including different kinds of autism, all kinds of things are now more of it's not either or, it's not binary. And so it's about what you identify with. There are people, as you know, that most of us are really sort of more towards the middle of the bell curve anyway, right? I don't know about yourself, but, and I have morphed more over to the introvert side, even though my friends don't always believe me about that. My editor even told me that on my last book before our last meeting. He said, Jennifer, I think you've become more introvert. I think you are an introvert. I said, no, I haven't gone that far. But he goes, you're prepared for meetings. You listen really well. He was ticking off all the strengths of an introvert. And so I think people do flex over time, Pete, really. And so I think that's where there's been some more like forgiveness and openness to, some people say they're ambiverts. Have you heard that term?
I have, yeah.
Yeah. Ambiverts are, people identify that, not as many. There hasn't been as much research on that, but people who go back and forth. And as you know from Myers-Briggs work, Carl Jung said we develop over time, right? So we do tap into those other sides of ourselves. So I'm very happy about the fact that we're not just kind of defining it in one structured way, that there is more flexibility according to the person.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, so given that, you mentioned some strengths of introverts. Can you share maybe a cool story? So you've got your book's The Introverted Leader and more.
Yeah.
Could you share with us a cool story about an introvert who just saw some phenomenal results in their career and some of the strengths that they brought to the table that are pretty typical of introverts?
One that I would think about is a woman named Jill Chang approached me. This woman, Jill Chang, was in Taiwan, and Jill reached out to me and she said, I just wrote a book. I was inspired by you and some others to really tap into and own my introversion. And it made such a huge difference in my life to see my strengths, not as weaknesses, but the fact that I spend the time preparing, the fact that I'm such a really great listener. And this happens a lot, Pete, with folks. They will get more confident because then you start to realize it's not a liability. This is actually a differentiator that you have, right, from extroverts. So she did. She's named all these things and she wrote me this long email and said, would you endorse the book? And of course, I was happy to. She went on then to write the book. It became like the #1 bestseller in Taiwan, multiple weeks. We're able to introduce her to our publisher here, and the book's come out a few months ago in English. It came out in Taiwanese, and she became a superstar in her country, I should say.
Cool.
Quiet is a superpower. And there's, and so it's just, there have been many people around the world now. I had a chance to speak in a number of countries and it was really cool to see the awakening there. But so that would be an additional thing I would say, that the whole awareness globally now has legs, and people like Jill are making such a difference in their world. And what's been also cool is we've all been able to collaborate, done multiple like webinars and presentations with people around the world too, who are introvert authors, introvert coaches. I got to tell you, when I started out in this, people like you took the Myers-Briggs, so you knew about it, but many people were like, what? How could you be an introvert and be a leader? It was a lot of selling, a lot of educating and awareness. So that's been so gratifying.
Lovely. Well, so let's hear about some of these, that the quiet is a superpower and some of these strengths. Can you enumerate a few of them for us?
Sure. Well, one of them is thinking and not just saying what's on the top of your mind. So it's giving deep reflection, and depth versus breadth is oftentimes what we say. Depth with relationships too. Introverts don't have any patience for small talk often, but they have a lot of really great relationships with people. Depth versus breadth. Observation. I mentioned preparation. That's one of the things that comes up a lot of the time, is being able to spend the time ahead of the interview to really think about what is your point, what are the points you want to make, what's the agenda for the meeting, all of the aspects of being successful in an organization where you're not just winging it, where you're really giving really deep thought. And then that really contributes to innovation, to creativity, and all of those great things. And then really, I would say the other real strength, and I think we saw this come out more in the pandemic, is being able to take quiet time. Being able to embrace silence, because that is really when the beautiful inspiration occurs. I remember one day coming home from work and seeing my 6-year-old in the driveway doing some of her fantasy twirling around. We had gotten her a tape of Gene Kelly and Ginger Rogers. She was pretending that she was like dancing and in her world. And then she caught my eye, and that moment, was kind of gone. She ran into the house, threw her umbrella down where she was doing Singing in the Rain. That was the end of that moment. And I always remembered that scene because that is what happens so much. We have that interruption from outside forces, but also from ourselves, where we don't take the time to really sit. And I will say for myself, one of the really real beauties, and I've heard this from other extroverts, is that we were forced in lockdown, right, to do that, to go within. Did you notice that as well? It was really a change this past year.
Oh, sure. It's like you just had fewer options available. And so you had to find something good there, for sure.
Right. So exactly. So I would say there are so many more. Writing is another one, is how introverts express themselves so beautiful. A lot of writers are introverted. Mm-hmm. And so those are some of the key ones. There's so many more, of course.
It's funny, that story with introversion, extroversion. I tend to prefer extroversion. And I remember when I was little, I was also kind of doing my own thing. And I believe I was Captain America or some superhero fighting bad guys. And I was like punching the air and making noises, all that stuff.
That sounds great on your mic.
Yeah. And then my mom came in and I too was kind of embarrassed, like, like, what are you doing? But it was funny. My reaction was, I felt a little sheepish, but I just kind of explained, well, you see, Mom, I was being captured in America and there were some bad guys who needed
You had to explain yourself.
Yeah.
You had to explain yourself. Yeah.
But yeah, that's what I did. And she's like, oh, okay, that's great. Well, I'll carry on.
Well, no, that's great that your mom allowed you to do that. Because it's one thing I will say is that, I'm really starting to explore this with some research with a woman who's doing more work with children and youth and teachers, because I really think that's where the opportunity is now, where we really need to start is working with young people to give them permission to do that, whether they be introverted or extroverted, having that time in your head. It's precious, but there's so much external force, and he doesn't talk up enough in class. You get graded down for that. All of this bias in our society. And it really hit me when I was doing career coaching for a number of years before I wrote my book. I had a career coaching practice, and I would see lawyer after lawyer come in, or, professionals who felt they had really poor self-esteem. And a number of them, when I traced back to what was going on, they were more introverted, and they had internalized that perception of themselves as not being sociable and not having the interpersonal skills to be successful in the work world. And so I had to do a lot of sort of unpacking of that with them. We need to give everybody a chance to reflect. So all of these qualities, whether it be at school or in the workplace, are positive for all of us. It's going to create better results. So.
Mm-hmm. Well, Jennifer, let's take this moment for listeners to maybe have some of those aha moments, some of those liberations. You said that the lawyers were feeling stressed and inadequate or inferior or troubled because they had internalized messaging that was, I guess, anti-introvert, if that's a fair characterization. And so can you lay it on us in terms of like, what are some of those epiphanies, those revelations that folks tend to have? Is like, oh, that's not a problem or a bad thing, but just the way I prefer to run my brain, and totally okay. And in fact, often advantageous. Can you share that with us?
Yeah, well, it's not always immediate that you turn around that negative thinking, because it's been years that it's been ingrained in you, whether consciously or not consciously by others. Again, I don't think parents or teachers ever meant to give us those messages. It's also the systems that we're in, right? To not encourage that. But I will say, I do have an image in my head of you do speaking as well, Pete. But when I will do this, I'll do a talk about introvert strengths, or that's a piece of the talk where we'll talk about strengths, we'll talk about challenges. And when I ask the audience to just say it for me, I'll get them started. I'll say, well, what's an introvert strength that you think? And people will, one by one, kind of warm up. They're great observers, or they're a great deep thinker, whatever things we talked about. You will literally, when you're in a live audience, I will literally see people sit up in their chairs, even like higher. I don't think I'm just visualizing that. And the comments that I get after talks and after training sessions, and what people write in the chats, is that they feel grateful to know this. It's like, aha. It's like the first time I don't know if you felt this way. When the first time I took a Myers-Briggs, I was like, I was kind of relieved that I was an extrovert, because I didn't really understand why my husband and I were having these issues. We were early, young marrieds coming home from parties, and he would just go into his cave, and I was like, what did I do wrong? It was immaturity too, but it was also like I needed to process the evening and he needed to get away. And just knowing that, learning that was huge. It was tremendous. And so I think once you see teams do this, when, I work with organizations, when teams start to talk about these differences, it makes such a difference in how they operate.
Well, there's a lot of great stuff here. So let's hear it. So if someone is an introvert, prefers extroversion, leans introvert, however you want to articulate it.
If they identify as an introvert.
Identify as an introvert.
Okay.
What are some of the top suggestions you have that can help make them all the more awesome at their jobs?
Right. And I like what you said, help make them more awesome, not change into an extrovert.
Yeah.
That is the key, right? When you stop trying to be an extrovert, that's probably the big idea here. And I found that when I researched leadership, when I researched influence, that's when introverts are most successful. So what do? The 4 Ps is what I usually go back to when that question is asked. And that came from the questions I asked of introverted leaders. I said, so how did you become successful? And we define success in different ways, in different industries, but they were seen as successful. And I interviewed all kinds of people. And they said, first of all, the first P is prepare. So back to their strength. Introverts prepare. They prepare questions. The kind of examples I gave earlier. And that's been a great lesson for me because I prepare a lot. And I see that you do because you prepare your guests. I've never gotten a slide deck before. I've been on 100 podcasts. I've never gotten a slide deck.
Well, thank you for reading it.
So you learn that, right? You learn how effective preparation can be. Mm-hmm. So anyway, that's one thing they do. And that's within all leadership scenario, whether it be networking and they're scared to go to a live networking reception. And they're like, how am I going to get ready for this? And I remember interviewing this one guy at Martin, and he said, I found out at our local, I had to do business development. I was really scared to do it, but I researched who was going to be there. Mm-hmm. And he found out that one of the guys was in this nonprofit that he was interested in. So he did the research. That got him the deal. It was so many examples like that, where he took the time. He didn't just I'm a great schmoozer, I'm going to come. Mm-hmm. Preparation. Second thing is presence. So what impressed me so much in my own working life was coming across introverted leaders. And I kind of sense when they were introverted, they were with me when they were with me. Mm-hmm. They were listening. They had their feet on the ground. They were tuned in. If they were doing a meeting, they weren't worrying about, I didn't prepare enough or what's going to happen in the outcome. They were truly tuned in to what was happening. And if things changed, they were able to flex because they weren't thinking about the past or the future. Presence is a huge strength. Third area was pushing. So what I meant by that, it was stepping out of your comfort zone. And that's what they told me. Again, the leader said, I stretch myself. And, we know this with people who are high performers, that they're constantly setting the bar higher. Not so much that they're going to pull a muscle, but that they're going to feel it a little bit the next day, that they push themselves. And then the fourth area is practice. And that's like all the virtuosos do. And I always use the examples of comedians, people like Jerry Seinfeld, who you wouldn't think has to go out on the road, but he does it because he talks about a comedic muscle, like a fiber optic cable that will shrivel up if it's not used. And so all the virtuosos practice all the time. So they look for opportunities to practice. And what happens is interesting because when I do these programs for senior leaders, we do a lot now on virtual of fireside chats. So I'll do sort of a presentation and then I'll have I'll ask for somebody at the C-level or at that area who's coming out as an introverted leader. And by the way, we used to have a lot of trouble getting those people to admit it or to understand it. And they come and we do a really vibrant conversation about that. And they talk about how they push themselves and how they stretch. And so for a number of them, I've had some recently who've been so nervous to do the fireside chat on Zoom, that they've actually written out everything and practice. We've done a session with it. It's very interesting. And then they practice and are good at doing what they do. But many of them are told by their teams and by others that they're not introverts. Well, saying there's no way you're an introvert. So they have to educate people.
Right. Oh, so these 4 Ps, that's an interesting maybe blend that we've got here. Because some of these things, it sounds like, come very naturally to introverts. And so it's sort of like, hey, lean into those strengths. You're going to wow them if you do this thing that introverts tend to often be good at anyway. And others are more of, and also try to do some things that might be a little uncomfortable.
Yeah, because we still live in a very extroverted world, don't we? Where people are, you are required to be in front of people. I mean, it's just the way it is. People judge you if you don't speak.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
In meetings, let's say you're with your peers and you're not speaking up, you got to learn some tricks to do that. And whether it's preparation or, part of that preparation might be to have somebody tee the ball to you when you want to make a comment. But I will say, P2, that model, it's been around since my first book. People really resonate with that. And I think it's not just introverts. I think extroverts need to use it too. Because what I like to see is have people like us go to the other side. Mm-hmm. In other words, they say to me all the time, what can I do to bring out the introverts on my team? How can I bring out their talent? It's like, why don't you try listening and be quiet?
Yeah.
Just, be quiet for a few minutes. And
Sure.
Nature abhors a vacuum. You asked about a quote earlier. I think it was Thoreau that said that. Nature abhors a vacuum. Something will fill that space.
Yeah. Well, I like that. You mentioned tricks. So yeah, let's share it with it.
Tips and tricks, huh?
So preparation, I guess, is a trick insofar as, I feel more comfortable being in this environment now that I know some things. Although I think that's probably universal. I think there's a Daniel the Tiger jingle about this.
Yeah, what is it? You're immersed in that now with your littles. Yeah.
I think is when we do something new, let's talk about what we'll do. Is the jingle. So that's for toddlers who feel uncomfortable, like, I'm going into a scary new place. It's like, well, hey, one means of conquering that is by, hey, here's what's going to happen. We're going to go to the doctor. Okay. There's going to be a sliding door. Okay. You're going to take off your shoes and get on the, whatever. And say, okay, this is what we talked about. All right. This is what's happening right now. Well, anyway.
No, there's a lot of analogies. That's absolutely true. It's absolutely true.
So tips and tricks. Let's hear some of your faves.
Well, my head is parked more now in what can the organization do? What can we do as leaders and as the system? And I know I can tell you tricks for introverts, but I think we've been putting a lot of pressure on introverts, just as you're sort of alluding to. It's like, well, they need to step out of their comfort zone. They need to do this, blah, blah, blah. But what about if we were to frame this as, you know what? Why do they have to keep changing? Why can't we look at the structures of our organization? And that's what I looked at in the last book, Creating Introvert-Friendly Workplaces. I tried to find pockets of introvert inclusion. How can we have meetings that are inclusive, not just for introverts, for everyone? So examples, okay, like on Zoom call, Zoom is on everybody's mind or virtual, right? Do we always have to have our cameras on? It's exhausting, being intentional about how we structure our meetings. One thing I'm looking at now, I'm preparing a program for SHRM on hiring and talent development, and taking a look at, as we're in our hiring practices, are we being thoughtful about the kinds of competencies we're looking for in people? Are we like putting our list of, our requirements, and then the person comes into interview and they're not necessarily the kind of person, the feedback comes back, well, they're not really the kind I want to have a beer with. I don't think I can have a beer with this person. And is that really essential to getting the job done? And I heard many conversations with my clients and what I call introvert advocates in organizations where they'd be sitting around promotional meetings, and somebody's name comes up and they say, well, they don't really speak a lot at meetings. And the person who's their advocate said, they're brilliant and they'll talk to you one-on-one. And they're really great with that and brilliant. So we can't pass over them. Don't forget about this person. So yeah, those are some of the things we can do. And actually structured advocacy is a term I just came up with now as we're talking.
All right. Innovation right now on the spot.
Where we have allies, people that are actually speaking up for people. But part of that advocacy has been the emergence too of what we call employee resource groups, which really comes under kind of the diversity and inclusion and equity agenda, where now it's not just an add-on to say, oh, we need to recognize introverts, but now I'm getting asked to come in and speak under the auspices of diversity and inclusion, because it's important to consider introversion as another aspect of that.
Yeah. That
we need to educate people, make them aware. So some of those examples I gave about hiring and about meetings, it doesn't take a lot to change those. I mean, those can be steps people can take and they can become aware. There's in the book, I lay out like 5 steps, I believe, called anyone can be a change agent. That you could be a voice for the quiet. You could speak up when you see that we're raising the issues, when you're seeing that we're maybe going too quickly. I was in a retreat last year where everything was happening really fast and that people were supposed to answer questions. It was sort of an exercise we were doing. And some lady one of the participants raised her and she goes, you know what? I'm an introvert and I'm already lost and overwhelmed. And I see that my colleagues here are the same way. But, it took courage for her to say that.
Yeah.
So being a person that speaks up for the quiet, intentionally addressing the needs, as I talked about, encouraging teams to bring up introversion. And one of the other tips I'll share is that senior leadership, like in anything else, Edgar Schein talked about senior leadership really leading the way.
Yeah.
It's what they say and they do that changes the culture. It's what they say and do that changes the culture. So that's why I'm so gratified about all of these fireside chats I've been doing, because what people write in the chat is like, oh, I didn't know that Jane was an introvert. It's incredible. And these individuals, leaders become very vulnerable.
Yeah.
So it's cool, and that's when people see that in an organization, that says more than just like, oh, we need to embrace everybody, right? Because they're actually modeling that it's okay and it's celebrated to be introverted.
Yeah.
I really love that part of it. That to me, that's another evolution that we've come to now. We couldn't have done it, years ago. Couldn't have included. People wouldn't have been willing to get up there and talk about it.
Well, that's cool. Thank you. Well, Jennifer, tell me anything else you want to make sure to mention before we shift gears and hear about some of your favorite things.
I think we've pretty much covered it all. One book that I think you might not have mentioned that I try to just bring attention to some because people ask about it is about how introverts and extroverts can get along. And it's called The Genius of Opposites. So it's the whole idea that we are exponentially better when we're together. We really create something that's better, like circling back to our way early conversation, John and Paul, right?
Yeah.
Exponential.
well, so now I can't just let that alone. Can you give us maybe a top 1, 2, or 3 things that extroverts and introverts can do well to harness the synergies between them?
Yes. Number 1, accept the alien. Know that you're not going to change the person. When you remember that, you will be in for a lot less stress.
Okay.
Bring on the battles. In other words, don't be afraid to have conflict because that's when you get the breakthroughs. And let's see, you can see I'm going in ABC order. C is cast the character, but the person in the right role and not try to take credit, undue credit. You're in this together. And I'll throw one. Can I throw a 4th in?
Oh, sure.
Destroy the dislike.
All right.
So you don't have to be best friends, but you can try to get along and respect each other. So yeah, there's some really great examples of pairs in there that people might enjoy reading. Genius of Opposites. So thanks.
Oh, thank you. All right. Well, now you gave us one. Is that the favorite quote you want to share with us? Or do you have another favorite quote to put forward?
This is from Malcolm X, of all people. It said, in all our deeds, the proper value and respect for time determines success or failure.
Okay.
I'm trying to manage with my time this week. So that was inspirational to me.
All right. Inspired.
Yeah, inspired. Right. Inspired, Pete.
And a favorite study or experiment or bit of research?
I think my last study on remote work is my favorite. We had 200 introverts. 85% of them said they prefer staying home at least part of the time remotely, and how it really speaks to their productivity and their satisfaction. And so I hope companies will take a look at that study because it really does come out strong. I don't think there have been any studies just done on introverts. So I've got that available on my website. So it's free download. So thanks for asking.
And a favorite book?
My favorite book, I just finished a book by one of my favorite women summer beach reads authors, Jennifer Weiner, not just because her name's Jennifer. And it's something with summer in the title. So it's very relaxing to read her, Jennifer Weiner.
And a favorite tool, something you use to be awesome at your job?
A favorite tool for me now is, as an app, I would say, would be, and I probably check it 20 times a day, Dashline. It sounds very mundane, but it keeps all my passwords.
And a favorite habit?
To get up early and sit on my deck and do 30 minutes of, or wherever I am, 30 minutes of free writing, which is, just sort of starting with a prompt and writing. And I've produced a lot of writing through the pandemic that way. So I'm going to keep doing it.
All right. And a particular nugget you share that really seems to connect and resonate with folks, they quote it back to you frequently?
Pete, I say a lot. So I think you'd have to ask my husband. Oh, I'll tell you a quote that he says, because he's very funny and we live together. So oftentimes, if I'm going on as an extrovert does, he will hold up the book and say, read the book. That's his quote. That's his quote. No, I think that's fine. I think that's probably the one I'll leave with.
Okay.
For now.
And if folks want to learn more or get in touch, where would you point them?
I would love people to come to my website. And I'm probably most active on LinkedIn and Instagram. So they can just look up my name on there. And jenniferkahnweiler.com. So you'll probably have that in the show notes, Pete, I imagine, huh?
That's right, yeah.
Okay, great.
And do you have a final challenge or call to action for folks looking to be awesome at their jobs?
Yeah, I think the challenge I would have is to schedule some time with somebody that is on your team that perhaps you don't know as well, or you feel maybe just a different personality type than you. And, schedule a 20-minute, half-hour call just to get to know them a little bit and learn more about what they do. I think the challenge right now with so many of us being remote is that we are getting disconnected. And that did come out strongly in the study I just referenced. We had 45% of our attendees say that they felt disconnected. So I think that's pretty significant. So I'd like to encourage all of us to get that weekly on our calendar to reach out to somebody we don't know as well in our worlds, in our teams, or outside our teams.
All right. Jennifer, thank you. This has been a treat, and I wish you all the best.
I love interviews that challenge me, and you definitely are at the top of that list, Pete. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
I really loved her take on destroying the dislike. 1, it's alliterative, and that's cool. 2, it's the ABCDs. You got an extra one. And 3, just that notion of putting the animus, making the enemy not the person, but rather your dislike, really, I find pretty motivating and powerful in terms of, let's see, what is it I dislike? And how can I get rid of that? And how can I better understand and reframe what's up here so we can better collaborate? So cool stuff from Jennifer. Again, the show notes, the transcript, the links to items we've referenced are at awesomeatyourjob.com/EP689. Hope to catch you next time, and peace.
Thanks for listening. To get the most out of the show, we recommend 2 key things. First, check out the extra resources at awesomeatyourjob.com. You can find this episode's transcript and links, as well as the perfect episode for your situation. You can search the full text transcripts of hundreds of episodes or explore episodes tagged by topic and competency covered. Second, subscribe to the podcast and get future episodes automatically. You can subscribe by telling Siri and several other smartphones and speakers, subscribe to the How to Be Awesome at Your Job podcast, or by tapping subscribe in your podcast player of choice. If you'd like some extra help figuring out podcasts and how subscriptions work, visit awesomeatyourjob.com/subscribe for guidance. Hope to catch you on the next episode of How to Be Awesome at Your Job.